I'd like to call this meeting to order and conduct a roll.
Yes. Chair Sinks.
In my last act,
Vice Chair Rennie.
here.
Director Harney.
Present.
Director Avi Koga. Here. Director Miller.
Here.
And I'll note that Director Gibbons is absent today.
Okay. We have public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Speakers interested can have up to 3 minutes. Do we have anybody from the public that wants to speak? Not Sunny now?
No, not today. Thank you.
Okay. Then I will take a motion on the minutes of February 22nd.
Second.
To approve them.
Aye.
Yes?
Oh, great. Okay.
I said
Second.
first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That passes unanimously. We will move to our next order of business, which is electing an executive committee chair and vice chair. And I would like to nominate Rob Rennie and Daniel Harney
Second.
to be chair and vice chair respectively. And my reasoning is I think it makes sense to have consistency between the officers of the board. That's purely my logic, but obviously other nominations are open. Anybody else? Seeing none, I will close nominations, and I have a vote in favor of the motion to elect Rob Rennie as our chair and Daniel Harney as our vice chair. All in
I'll
favor?
second.
Aye.
Aye.
We need a second. I'll
I
second it.
think Howard seconded.
Oh, okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I'm done, man. That's all you got?
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I guess
I appreciate, that we're sharing leadership here, right? That's the other thing.
well, as my first act as the new chair is to thank the old chair for his service and apt guiding of us for the last almost year now.
Where's
I
my
guess.
gold watch?
Yeah. Work on that.
Clearly, you're never going to make it in Congress. You're supposed to launch an investigation against him.
That's right. That brings me to the next agenda. Well, we'll skip that agenda. I don't think we need to investigate Rod. So, going to our.
I got energy features on my
So
Tell me
let's.
the Russian ties were worried.
Are we ready to go to item 3? So item 3 is basically we want to cancel the meeting in November and the meeting in December that occur when most likely people are doing holiday stuff, and reschedule a meeting for December 5th? December 5th?
Yeah. And you can be glad I fussed about it because I said December 26th might not be a good day, right?
Yeah.
Good.
So moved.
Okay, so any questions? No, we have a motion to move this. I get. So I think Margaret moved it, and we'll give Vice Chair Harney the second. I heard first. Any discussion? Any comments from the public? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like it passes unanimously. Anybody opposed? No? Okay. Moving on to item 4, which is an alternative to Type 2 renewable energy. Mr. CEO, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, okay.
It's been somewhat of a struggle for us to try to find that type of resource in the market. Initially, when we decided on the power resource mix, we decided to do 25% of Type 1, 25% of Type 2, and 50% of large hydro, and that's how we get our 100% carbon-free. There was no issue or a problem finding the Type 1 or the carbon-free. There has been a considerable issue finding the Type 2 initially. we didn't get enough available with type 2, and it was fairly expensive, well beyond what we thought we were going to be paying for it. And we tried a number of times since the first time we went out back in September, and we got less and less players in the market willing to provide the type 2, and the ones that did provided a higher price. The last time we went out was right after the last executive committee meeting, when we shared with you that we're having a tough time finding the type 2. Out of roughly 18 different suppliers that we sent the RFP to, only one that came in wanted to provide the script of the type 2 at a price still higher than what I thought it should be, but still it was reasonable enough. That we said we'll work with them. We didn't have an EEI with those folks. After we told them we'll work with them, they told us it's going to take them quite a bit of time just to review, with their credit lawyers to review ours, their bankers, and we have yet to receive from them an okay that we're fine for them to do business with. The last call that we made to them was yesterday to try to find out where they are. They said that the credit folks are still working on it, and they also told us that they are likely to jack up the price a little bit more than what they gave us in response to the RFP. It is becoming obvious to me now, after chasing after this type of resource for a number of months, that something has happened in the market, and I can speculate on a number of things that happened, but the bottom line is the type 2 resource as defined by the CPUC seems to be in short supply. And now the question that we have to do, that we have struggled with, is what to replace it with. I'm offering 4 alternatives here for you that we can think about and choose from. The first one is to basically replace whatever type 2 that we can find with hydro, large hydro. And that will pretty much keep us whole as far as being at 100% carbon free, and so that commitment will still be intact. And it will save us money relative to type 2. On the other hand, we did promise in our marketing for the past number of months now that we're going to be doing 50% renewable, 50 and 100% carbon free. Obviously, the implicit assumption that we made here is that 50% renewable is really 50% eligible renewable as defined by the state of California. Then the other 50% would be large hydro. So if we increase the hydro beyond the 50% that we have already in place, we will have to change all the marketing activities that we are doing, changing the structure of the 2 types of products that we are offering, and that's just not a good idea.
What's the circumstance in which we would have to do that again?
We don't have type 2. We need to buy something to replace it.
Yeah.
So the idea.
What particular would trigger us trigger our having to remarket? We'd be less than 50% renewable.
Or less than 50%,
that
yes.
in particular.
Yeah, exactly.
According to the RPS.
Yes. So I'm suggesting that we don't follow that route, because I think there will be a credibility issue if we do it, if we go that route. The second option would be to go to 100%, and instead 50% type 1, 50% large hydro, to basically replace type 2 with type 1. Now, to put this into context, we are required for this year to meet 27% of our of our needs with renewable resources that would be minimum 75% of that would be type 1, maximum would be 10% type 3, and the rest of it, the other 15%, could be either type 1 or type 2. So this is what we're required to do by legislation. And that generally would cost somewhere around $16 million. And here I'm talking average over 5 years. I'm not talking 2017 or 2018 in particular. I'm just talking about average over the next 5 years.
Aggregate or average per year?
It would be an average per year of about $16 million, over and above what we would have spent had we just didn't have any requirements to do renewable resources of any kind. So just to meet the law requirement, we have to spend a premium of about $16 million.
And
In addition,
there's this last sentence here, increasing PCC 1 to 50% would increase the prime cost by an additional 4%.
Just bear with me, I'll get to that one. By going to 100% carbon-free resources, we, in a sense, added another about $16 million premium that we have to pay just to go from what the law requires, which in itself is a $16 million expense, to go to 100% carbon-free. So generally it's about $32 million, which roughly makes up about 20% premium over and above what you would spend on conventional energy. If we go that extra step of doing away with type 2 and going only to type 1 for up to 50% of our needs, that will constitute average over the next 5 years of another $7 million, or 4% roughly of our total cost. So that's the context. So if we do want to go to type 2, there's expectation there will be an additional $7 million that will need to be spent over and above what we already had planned.
Can I ask you, just to clarify so that is really clear, half of our power supply is big hydro.
Yes.
And the difference that we are paying from presumably natural gas, which is the baseline, to big hydro is an incremental $16 million a year.
No, the difference to go from what we are required to do, which is 27% renewables, split into 75% of this, 10% of that, and 15% of the other thing, to go into 25% type 1, 25% type 2, and 50%
To do what we
hydro.
were intending to do.
Yeah.
It was already
It's
above
already
the
16.
state's requirement, which is what PG&E sort of drags in meeting, is $16 million.
So we already made that commitment in order to go 100% carbon free.
So from that base plan that we established last summer to a plan that would take, because it's unavailable, take the PCC2 and replace it all with PCC1, meaning half would be then big hydro and half would be PCC1.
Yes.
That's an incremental $7 million a year on average.
That's correct.
Got it.
That's the average over the next 5 years.
Okay.
Beyond that, remember we already locked in for the next 3 years some PCC2.
Right.
That is a portion of our load. Beyond that is 2020 and 2021 is where really a good expenses coming in. Right now, our shortage on PCC2 is about 435
So we
gigawatt
bought
hours.
some, but not enough. Or
We bought all we could buy from one entity that said, I have this much at this price. We took all that stuff back.
how
in
long is
September.
it covering us?
Only 3 years. We bought it for 2017, 18, and 19.
Does it cover most of our need or some
No,
of
no,
our need?
it covers barely 150 gigawatt hours of roughly 900. So
Percentage
maybe
wise?
about 15% of the type
15% of our
Of
type
the
2 that we
type
had
two.
hoped to buy
Yes.
over the next, for the
Yes.
next 3 years.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So that's the option number 2. Go to PCC1 for half of our needs and incur the additional cost of another $7 million. The third option that I'm recommending to you is, which is something that you brought up in the last board meeting, what if for every megawatt hour that you couldn't find of type 2, we'll just replace it with 2 megawatt hours of RECs or renewable energy credits of type 3. Basically go negative on carbon. Instead of just going to zero carbon, we go negative. Generally, that will actually save us some money. There's a sentence here that I put in that implies that we actually could benefit the cities by generating an additional reduction of greenhouse gas, which the cities can claim. I've learned from Melody yesterday that is not the case. That she has not seen anything that implies that we can go as cities, that is, anything below zero. So zero is the cutoff, and so I have to take that line back. You cannot get any more credit beyond just going zero on greenhouse gas.
So it's something above and beyond that we could do. Anyway.
Yeah, we can do anything beyond the 100% carbon free, and so we can do that. It will become a large chunk of BCC3, and we do have certain struggle. But not that I'm not able. I mean, I'm able to defend and I can deal with it if need to. But there is the stigma that is associated with BCC3 that some folks just still out there pushing in the legislative and regulatory area.
What are the evils of PCC3?
It's outside of the state of California, and you can't. There's no transmission that you have access to that you could use as a way to move that energy, at least on paper, contractually into California.
So you're saying you would buy it outside of the Western grid?
No.
It'd still be in the Western grid,
It would just
which
be
is
in the
still
Western
technically
grid.
connected.
In my humble opinion, it's better than Type 2 actually reduces greenhouse gas better than Type 2 does, because Type 2 you still have to, at one point or another, deal with the transmission constraints and bundle it with grid resources instead of just having that generation happen somewhere else and not worry about the congestion in the transmission system, and still be secured in the notion that for every megawatt hour generated from these resources, there's 1 megawatt hour less of natural gas resources on the Western grid that would be in place. So this again will save us, if we go 1 for 2, it will save us somewhere around $1.4 million annually over the next 5 years. The last option that I'm recommending that you consider is to do 2 things. One is to buy enough BCC1 to cover 100% of what we are required to do by law. Right now, remember the whole idea of getting 27% this year, 29% next year, and so on, is that you can split it into 3 different types. You can buy this 75% of this, 30% of that, and 15% of the other thing. I'm suggesting in this option that 100% of what we are required to do to take care of the California requirements will be a PCC1.
How close are we now?
Well, we committed to 25%. This year we'll go to 27. Next year we'll go to 29. The year after 31,
so we're
33.
State step up.
Yeah.
You just need a little bit more.
So we'll need a little bit more for this year, a little bit more than that for the following year, and so on.
But the state doesn't say we have to be PCC 1 or 2. We could even be PCC 3 for that.
That'd be all.
The state basically requires that 75% of that 27% for this year will be Type 1. So 3/4 of the 27% that you're required to do will be Type 1, which translates into 20.5.
And you're saying let's bring it to 100 instead of 75.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of messing around with type 2s and type 3 and trying to figure out how to make the state happy, let's make them really happy and go 100% with PCC1. Then that argument completely be taken off the table, and we no longer have to argue about which one is more renewable than the other one. Which is better? Is it PCC2 or the PCC3? Right now, the state, obviously by definition, by the way they have crafted this thing, are giving huge preference to PCC1. They require that a minimum of 75% of what you're required to do is PCC1. And they also require that a maximum of 10% of what you will do will be a PCC3. So they say, we really like PCC1, we really don't like PCC3. And that is kind of like the argument from there that everybody carries and took to mean that PCC3 is a bad thing, PCC1 is a good thing, do more of this, do less of that. Fine.
But that was really based on labor wanting it in the state, right?
Economic development in the state. Labor obviously pushed pretty hard for the state. A lot of the solar folks pushed very hard to, and a lot of the people that basically wants us to make sure that the renewable resources are brand new built, and not just use the old stuff that's lying around in Idaho and the wind that's in Wyoming and stuff that's already in place. When you force in type 1, i.e. built in California, dynamically scheduled into California, in a sense you are saying you're going to have to put some new stuff in the ground because you can't, there's not enough stuff in the ground that will take care of your requirement, and you can't take advantage of all the stuff that's in other states connected to the Western grid, even though it's as good as in reducing greenhouse gas, but still it's not new resources. You're going to have to build some new stuff. And that's what's been going on now for the last few years, and because of it, we have, I think, in the States, anybody you can correct me if they like to, we got a lot more renewable resources, more specifically solar, have been built in the state of California in the last 10 years than we could ever really hope for. We went from 500 megawatts to 9,000 megawatts.
We can almost never use, right? Well, that's part of the problem.
For the time being. I mean, we certainly could use it if we
So we
could.
have a storage technology.
Exactly.
But what about wind? There's an article about refurbishing the wind down in the Palm Springs area.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of sitting together with the California Wind Association people, and you could never see more grim faces in your life because there's considerable amount of regulation that pretty much halt their progress of building any new wind in California. You can build wind all over the place.
Because of state law?
Because of restrictions of the state EPA that basically say you can't put any more wind here. You can't. They pretty much restricted wind in just about all the pockets where you can build wind and take advantage
The
of it.
birds get caught.
And it's because of the birds, because of a variety of other reasons. That anyway, if the birds are migrating in this direction or that direction, and this is where birds like to migrate when the wind blows. I think it makes sense. Get a little bit of wind down.
But I thought the new ones moved slow enough that they weren't nearly as dangerous to birds. The newest windmills.
But the legislation moves even slower.
Thank you. And that's what they are suffering.
You set it up
So what the wind people are doing is they say we are trying to revamp the old ones. So a whole bunch of the old winds that we built in the past are coming to the contracts are coming back full circle, and so we want to take out the old wind generation, put in the new ones where the blades are a little longer and the capacity out of each one of those is a little higher. So you replace in the same area what used to be 40 megawatt with 400 megawatt, which is great if they can make it happen. But in general, we all seem to be not too happy with the progress or the number of legislation that pushes and regulation that pushes them back from developing wind generation in the state. So really in the state at this point, when it comes to renewables, the only game in town is solar. For all practical purposes, it's the only thing that you can build in at a large quantity. All of it is coming down out in the desert in Southern California with all kind of congestion issues to bring that power up north.
But without storage, it seems to me that we don't really want to build that much more solar.
That's pretty much what I've been telling every solar developer that came to visit over here for the last 2 months. My point is, go back, figure out a way to store some of that solar, and I know it will cost a little bit more. I know, it's going to be a tough climb to convince the board to spend a little bit extra and get no more energy. You're just shifting the energy generation. But I think we have to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Just developing solar without storage is
If I remember correctly from our risk management meeting, if solar gets so bad, we actually would have to pay money for our solar to be delivered to our customers.
Exactly.
Perhaps not this year, maybe not next year. 5 years from now, almost guaranteed that if the solar development keep going the way it's going, there will be a lot of days when negative pricing will have to happen.
So this all circles back and says PCC 1 doesn't make that much sense to keep pushing.
No, but Lino just introduced a bill to go to 100% renewable, and it's the same definition. So they won't count large hydro, they won't count all the other stuff. So he wants 100% solar.
So then we have an always-on problem, don't we?
Hey, look, San Luis Reservoir, they do have storage there between the new and Fort
I've heard
Hays.
people talk about that.
But
I
it's like 80
want to suggest
megawatts.
to you
It's
that
ridiculously small.
I want to suggest to you that we're actually talking. I was talking to Hillary before this meeting about the need to do a workshop on legislative and regulatory matters, and talk more specifically about how to address all this legislation. One of them is the one that you just mentioned. We got quite a few that we have to deal with. That seems to be somewhat, definitely environmentally pushed very hard, but are not exactly keen on the operational side of things.
Can I ask a question about solar? Just
I think Margaret wants to ask one here somewhere.
Yes.
Go ahead.
within our area, right? We have several net producers on the solar side.
Sure.
And let's take, we're going to deal with the county in a minute here, right? But they have a large facility. During the day, it's not just demand mitigation, they're a net producer. So can't we count that as type 1 and then give them the hydro at night?
No, the California ISO by rule excludes any solar that is less than 1 megawatt. They count that as a reduction in load rather than an increase in generation.
Yeah, but that's like my house. But the county project is more than a megawatt.
We have to, we definitely have to work on that. That's another discussion that I'm having with the staff to see if there's a way that we can count that towards our renewable requirement. Right now, the SVCE, I think I got that one right, didn't I?
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it tends to. I think it's the way it's written, and you're going to hear later on from Don about it. The PG&E rule doesn't count for it as a type 1. You can't get credit for it, and in fact, all the credit would go to the county. And I'm going to leave that later on to be explained by Don, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I was just thinking there are a few large solar facilities, and if they could somehow be counted, but it doesn't sound like they can.
I like to. And he knows it.
It was all thought.
So back to this recommendation, what I'm recommending that we meet 100% of the state requirement with BCC 1, then we are then somewhat free from the obligation of to, at least in our head, think about what's good and what's bad in accordance to the BCC definition, to think about what's best for this agency. And therefore, my recommendation is for this one is for anything beyond what we got from type 1 all the way to 50% of eligible renewable, we will find the least cost resources, and that's going to be PCC3, and there's no two ways around it. That if we can find all the PCC3 that we can find, we get that, and if we can't find enough, then we go back to PCC1 and PCC2 if we can find that.
Well, we already have 2 committed. So if we're 27, how much was the vision would be 27 to the 1. How much of 2 do we have then? Because you've already committed to some.
We have 25%. We have 25% PCC1. We have the 50% large hydro.
How much 2 have we committed to?
Oh,
We have enough
for this year. For this year, we committed to 150 gigawatt hours. So the remaining amount that we needed to get for this year for PCC2 is 435 gigawatt
I'm just
hours.
trying to get back all in percentages and trying to figure out.
In percentages, we have 25% of PCC2. Sorry, PCC1. Then we'd increase that by another 2%,
So
which
27.
of the total, the total. So we'll get to 27%. Then the rest of it will be a PCC3.
No, but you've already committed to
What do we
some
have
too.
for this year?
Yes, I'm talking about the 435 is what we need in addition to what we already committed
Okay,
to.
Tom, I'm asking
Yeah.
for the pie chart. How much percentage 1, how much percentage 2 have we already committed to?
Right now, we're committed to 25% PCC1, to 50% large hydro, and we have for
We largely
2017.
procured that, right?
Yeah, that's all locked. All these prices are locked. And of the 25% of the PCC2 that we needed to have for this year, and it's a little difficult because this year we don't have full load, so it's not going to be consistent throughout. But for this year, I'm doing the calculations in my head, so just bear with me for a minute. We're probably roughly about 16, somewhere between 16 to 20%. That we already, not of the total. So of the 25%. So 5%. 5% type 2, 25% type 1, 50% large hydro. We still have an open position of 20%.
And that 20% we could do with type 3?
Yeah, of course. And
never mind.
Yeah, and
I'm
what I'm
sorry,
suggesting
is that
is,
for this year, because at the last board meeting, I thought you said, or the report said you had procured enough type 2 for at least this year. Is that not
no,
the case?
that's not the case. No, well, we
Because I thought it was in our staff.
in the staff report we said that we have found one supplier that will be willing to fill that open position. That's the one
rest of the year.
for the rest of the 5 years. But that's the one that I've been talking about earlier, that still looking at our credits and already came to us this morning and said we're looking at jacking up the prices a little bit more.
But they can still fill it.
If our
we
credit
pay.
fills, if our credit is fine, and if we're willing to pay
Okay.
whatever additional money that they
They're
want.
playing a
that they
game
want
because
to.
I'm sure everybody else is trying to sort out
Yeah,
the
they're
same
probably
Yeah.
gonna, right, if
Yeah,
they're the
yeah.
only ones supplying
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
So my other question that I wanted to ask earlier is, can we afford all of these options? With 7 million versus 300,000 is a big difference, but can we afford 7 million if we
Well-
had to? Because I'm just thinking, my community, we at their meeting, I get the sense that they're going to want to do PCC1 fully. So, yeah, but if obviously there are financial implications, but
Yeah.
if they're not doable, then that's automatically off the table, correct? But
No, we
can afford to do any of
by
it.
the end of 2017, we're supposed to have somewhere around a surplus of 20,
About 28 million for this fiscal year.
20 million plus. So can we
So
afford
we
it?
would just
Yeah.
eat into the
Yeah.
deficit.
I mean, quite frankly, if we want to do the entire thing with BCC1, we can. But you're not going to afford anything else. I mean, that really, it's not a trade-off whether you want to spend the $7 million to go into 100% PCC1
Sure.
and probably worsen the situation here in California a little bit more with additional solar, or spend some of that on reducing your rates for next year, or spend some of it on some of the programs that we would like to do. Sort of trade-off.
Yeah, and I think that's the conversation we'd have to have. But from our meeting that we had, and we had 56 people, it was great. It was great turnout. I just got. They were asking, well, why can't everyone go into green prime? The cost wasn't the issue as much as we want, clean as we can get. And so I don't. I think and I'm coming in late, but if our purpose is to supply clean energy, I think that's what our purpose should be, not necessarily, we can, sure, I know we committed to the 1%, but that's debatable, I'd say, and even offering different programs is debatable. I think our mission is to provide the cleanest energy possible.
No, programs is not debatable. I think we'll get to the program discussion.
But we have to have that conversation with our communities and.
But I don't think it's debatable at all, because we're going to have to invest in storage facilities. We're going to have to push that, or we're going to be cut out. So it's not a program like get a light bulb.
But what if we just encourage, like you were talking about, businesses to go into that field by lobbying and changing, the definitions and whatnot. I mean, there's other ways of doing it. We don't have to necessarily do it ourselves. I think that's the conversation we're going to have.
Or we will be cut out.
Rod, you have something to say on this one?
I have a couple of questions. First thing I would say is I've been in a lot of meetings about this wonky thing that we're doing. The people that show up, almost all of them, except maybe in his city, say, oh, sure, I'm happy to pay more. Now we'll see how many people actually do that.
In my city.
A lot of affluent people say this is my ethic, so I get it. The problem is, right, the 99.995% of the folks that haven't shown up care about rates, okay? And there are a lot of people who, as we found coming down to the South County, for whom lower electricity rates are an imperative. And quite frankly, this whole thing between type 1, 2, and 3 is a lot of social policy that doesn't go toward the green, okay? So the RPS has a bunch of things in it which I've learned over time are certainly political, and they feel good. I heard from some people, and I'd actually want to hear from the staff that's been interacting with the regulatory sector to see what type 3 mean for us under various scenarios, so I'll have some more to say about that. But, I heard from some folks that part of the lobbying that went on that excluded big hydro from the RPS was that, the big utilities, SoCal Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric, don't have access to much big hydro, and therefore, right, they lobbied successfully to keep it out of the RPS. I think we have to be smart, because the truth is $7 million a year is a lot of money that we could return to ratepayers or use on incentive programs that might do even more good than something that's merely feel good.
Or to secure future supply.
Secure future supply, stabilize rates, do a bunch of that stuff.
I think another thing we need to back up and put in perspective is we're the only ones that are trying to do 100% carbon free.
Yeah.
We're already going beyond. We don't want to kill ourselves, trying to, be even more green on top of that. What is PCE? They're coming out at 75% carbon free.
Here's what I see.
Where's San Francisco right now?
Yeah, let me just continue.
Yeah.
So here's what I see happen. And it's at Peninsula Democratic Club yesterday, right? I put in a question, well, how are we going to deal with the duck curve? They don't want to answer that question, right? Everybody's like, oh, let's build more solar, and we're all happy. And it's like, holy shit, you're about to come up against a wall in our place. And all that encouragement for building local solar, what happens when in 2019,
You have to pay to put your solar on the grid.
Instead of it being, 10 to 2 or 10 to 3 or whatever, that period shifts from 5 to 9. Those people that made an investment in solar are going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, the individuals are going to be pretty SOL. It's going to look like Nevada.
Because they're not going to be generating anything at 5 p.m. until 9 p.m., right?
And they can't come home and plug their car in. And
So
charge
who
up.
are they going to get mad at now? Who are they going to get mad at?
The one charging them.
Who's that? Yeah. So I actually think we need to be more than feel good. We have to be responsible, and we have to think about the fact that we're not representing just the environmental community, right? That might feel really good because they're willing and they're affluent enough to pay the 3 to 5% more. I've signed up, okay? But I think we have to think about everybody, especially the people that struggle to pay their utility bills in this county. And I would argue that there are actually a lot more of them than you might think. But I will get off my soapbox.
But we're 100%. But we've hit the 100% green thing. Everything else is
100% carbon free.
100% carbon free, which is 100% green.
So
the 50% category is purely political.
see, I rather like option 3. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was a clever marketing tool, but I actually would like to hear from, you could do 4 prime. You could say, to the extent that we're doing PCC3 in option 4, we'd cover them with double RECs, and I wonder what that would cost, right? Above the $300K per year. But I'm actually interested in hearing what the people that have, particularly you, Hillary, that have some sense, maybe Don, you, or
I like 3 also.
I'm interested in. I'm interested. You do. Yeah, but I'm interested in what the perception and our position with regulatory agencies would be if we were to choose any PCC3. And then I'm not sure if it matters how much we're doing. I would rather. I kind of feel like, as soon as somebody says, "Oh, you're buying on the bundle RECs," if we say, "Hey, we're killing 2 units of carbon for every unit of renewable electricity that we're consuming or we're sourcing," right? I think that might be a better comeback than arguing about the amount of PCC3 that we're buying. And I'm interested in your opinions about this. Anybody else that deals with
Purely
CPUC?
It's a PR statement.
It's a PR statement, right? Which is, I think,
regulatory one.
I think
Anyway.
that's. I would agree with that. I mean, from a sort of pure regulatory compliance standpoint, these are all basically equivalents. We're already, for the RPS purposes, we're already above and beyond what we need to do. So I think that from a pure compliance standpoint, the stakes are not very high.
Yeah, but it's going beyond that to how we're perceived by CPUC
And I think
board
that,
members in particular, right?
yeah, I think that's where the issue is going to be. I mean, definitely, for better or for worse, the conversation has revolved around, like, if you look at the en banc that happened back in February about CCAs, there was definitely a perception of bucket 3 as being something that was not a good thing, that was a threat to the broader sort of clean energy picture in California. Like MCE, Marine Clean Energy, for example, still has some bucket 3 RECs, but basically the way they frame that is, we are the oldest, we have to do everything for the first time, and basically their rhetoric around that is, we had to do bucket 3 basically as an artifact of the fact that our path to maturity was very long and hard, and we're working to get away from that. And the newer CCAs tend to be talking about trying to get away from or avoid altogether bucket 3 right from the start. So I think that there's a strategic element there, in that I think that if we want to do this, we are going to have to be prepared to stand behind a different narrative than is being advanced in the broader CCA community conversation right now. And
So
that's-
it could be, hey, we're the only ones that are 100% carbon free. We made that election because that's how much we care about greenhouse gases. Yes, there's another definition called the RPS, but we're 100% carbon free. No other CCA can say that. The second thing you could say, right, is yes, we are taking some PCC3, but we're actually
Isn't that better than taking
doubling
carbon?
down. Well, I think that's a good story, right? But I think maybe there's something else that tempers the PCC3 thing, like we do the 2-for-1. I think there's a story.
Yeah, isn't that the
around
oddity?
it.
Because we could cover this.
I'm kind of like between option 3 and option 4. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, how those two might be viewed. I'm kind of, yeah.
I mean, I think option 4 is option 4 is the safer option from a PR standpoint.
It is.
For sure. I think because if we're not planning on challenging the prevailing narrative, I think option 4 is safer. I think that,
Okay.
but that said, I mean, we're new. We're already going above and beyond what other CCAs are doing. We have an opportunity now, when we're new, to sort of build a different narrative right from the get-go if we want to.
But our top line message has been 100% carbon free.
Yeah.
That's been our top line message. That's been our focus. That is the real green
And you
message.
were the guy that
Nationally
first spoke up about
and
it.
internationally, that is the message: is carbon free, and we're on that message. When you get down into the state of California, and every time I watch them touch the laws, this whole renewable thing is just a crock, right? This is so gerrymandered up 6 ways from Sunday.
But it
This
does
is just-
matter politically.
But it's the
Yeah.
reality of it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is reality.
It's not-
You know, you can say whatever you want, but there is a political reality. And if we fight, say we're doing this, we don't care about what other people or the public opinion is, they're going to come after us.
99% of the public don't know. The difference.
Well, honestly, I think the unions have a big say in this, and the environmental community will come and they can join together. They will try to.
We're supposed to be leaders,
Dictate what
and I
we're
would
trying
rather
to do.
have that debate than to hide from the debate because we're afraid of.
Well, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have a debate. I think we should,
The
but
100% greenhouse gas free is a huge deal. We could meet the entire thing, I think, with the numbers that you already have, by just saying, let's be 90% greenhouse gas free. That would be trivial for us. We'd save a fortune. But that's not who we are. We were about being the greenest, and we went with 100% carbon free for a reason. You go 10 miles north of here, and they're 25% carbon, right?
I actually agree with Rod. If we're going to do this, I think we need to do something else. So the 2-for-1, whatever it is, there needs to be something to, offer more of to be able to justify.
We could call that 4 prime for the sake of it, right? It means to the extent we're buying bucket 3, that we would buy 2 regs per.
So you would go meet the state requirement with bucket 1.
I'm
100%
suggesting it
of
as an alternative.
But I'm trying to follow along with you. 100% of bucket 1. So we meet the state requirement, the 27% with all bucket 1. Now it costs us 10 more. And then the rest that we can't get with bucket 2, we fill with the bucket 3, and we go double on the bucket 3.
Yeah, but I would say,
Okay.
maybe with
3 and 4.
maybe what's going to happen here is if we keep going crazy with solar, right? Bucket 1 is suddenly going to be in trouble.
Yes.
Because we're going to have way too much of it, right? And people are going to crave other buckets. So maybe bucket 2 will come back. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would prefer
Things will
to
change.
stick with, to the extent that bucket 2 is it, let me ask you this way, is it feasible to continue our policy of trying to buy bucket 2 and then considering whatever else we do here as an alternative to that? Or you say bucket 2 is gone, not coming back, not worth continuing to spend any energy trying to go seek it?
Yeah, we definitely can.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah,
I don't want to put an extra burden on you.
No, it's all you have to do is just send a schedule of a bunch of numbers to a whole bunch of suppliers and see what comes. Yeah, so it's not out of the question that we can continue to try to get bucket 2 and and I haven't given up on those bankers that single supplier that is still out there talking about supply bucket 2. But I think we should be prepared for what could be the inevitable comes 2018 and 2019, or bucket 2 becomes just not existent. And if not to actually adopt it immediately, at least to have it in our back pocket.
No, I'm okay with it.
Rod, could you make a motion?
There is something that before you do that I would like to put out there, and I've heard it now twice from the director of the energy section of the CPUC, the staff person, not the commissioner, but the staff person who directs the energy side of the CPUC, and I've heard it from him more than once now, that his view is that we should stop talking about RPS and stop talking about carbon free.
Really?
Yep. And
That's exactly where we've gone, in other words.
and his approach is, it's a 3-pronged approach, or 3-legged stool, however you want to call it. It's one, you go to 100% carbon free, or 0 carbon, or carbon neutral, whatever, however you want to call it. Do that at the least cost while maintaining system reliability. That's the 3-pronged approach, which I happen to think is probably the best thing I've ever heard coming out of anybody that works at the
Least
CPUC.
political, most climate sensible, right?
Most climate sensible, most system sensible, operational sensible, because we do risk the possibility that what we see here happening a few years from now is what happened back in Germany in 2012, when they were just going absolute berserk on the solar, and they end up having a system-wide outage.
It's going to be a hell of a problem.
And I've been through the 2001 fiasco, and a lot of it was pushed because of a lot of political standing out there, and eventually we end up having the crisis that we had back in 2000, 2001, and saw the electricity prices go up from $10 billion for the state to $30 billion in a matter of 1 year. And I'm just cautioning that if we continue down this back in type 1 and back in state solar, we're going to end up having the same kind of problem.
Yeah, the state hasn't gotten there yet, but if they could convert the large hydro that's off the table to, say, large hydro that's converted to storage facility, I think there are legislative
Large
things.
hydro should count.
Yeah.
Well,
Frankly.
they, like, for example, go back to the San Luis Reservoir, right? That's the closest storage facility to us.
Oh, I see. In the sense that it falls once, you're not pumping it back. It's
No,
just,
they can
It's
pump
a-
it. They can pump from the forebay
Okay.
back, so it isn't an actual storage facility. But the problem is there's no plans on the books to expand it because there's no economic incentive for them to do that, and it's because of the legislative side of it. That's where the forefront needs to be. That's why I say we need to be out there encouraging storage.
So,
Yes, you're definitely.
so I think we want to wrap this item up,
Let me
but
just weigh in
It needs to
over,
be a
Yeah.
if you don't mind. So, I hear the whole argument about carbon free and trying to use as much renewable energy, but to me, at the end of the day, we need to make sure this company is sustainable, right? One of the things that I'm looking for is to make sure that we can sustain the rates long term. And so when we start spending more money on more politically correct types of products, that starts eating into the reserves that are going to give that rate stability to our customers. So, I've looked at this many different ways, and I still think that I'm not comfortable with the RECs, but I think if we start developing the storyline today, and we start building a strategy around that storyline, I think it gets easier to explain. I don't think people are going to drop out of this program because of unbundled regs. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think people are going to drop out of this program because the rates are going to go up, and there's no consumer advantage to staying in here.
Right.
And so I'm in favor of option 4.
What about
Option 4 or option 4 prime? Prime was
Combination.
double the PCC3s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tom, do you
We wanna know
need
what it costs.
a motion to recommend something to the board, or how are we going to proceed at the
I
board
think
with
that
this?
there was more of a discussion just to hear the different voices, and it will be because we decided at one point or another we don't need motions at the executive committee, but at least we need to get a sense of where you all are.
Are you going to rewrite this for the board meeting then, based on our discussion?
To the extent that it's at least 3 of you tell me you need to rewrite it to go with the 4 prime.
Sounds more defensible.
Okay.
It's only a couple percent more type 1 that you have to pick up some cost.
I would say probably for just Don wants to say something.
It's in the minutia category, but I think it's important, which is PG&E this week or last week came out with the stat that they're now 33% renewable. And I don't know what those buckets are or anything else, but I think it's going to be important for us to at least be as good in our 33% as PG&E is, and then what we do after that, we can strike off into our own territory. But we wouldn't want our them to come back and say for that 33% that we're doing as PG&E, somehow we're cutting corners to even get to that 33%. And somebody will have to look at that and do the math. We may be fine right where we are, but I think that's important. The other question I'd have is what our 100% product is. So Green Prime was assumed to be 50% bucket 1, 50% bucket 2. How does Green Prime change? And I do know some of the corporates pay attention to this sort of thing. They want to know exactly what comprises that product. And we haven't really talked about that here. I just think it's important to define it, whatever we decide.
And I think also, I mean, 2 points, just as we're wrapping up here. The first being, I think your point about the narrative, I think, is really good. Like, we're in the process of developing programs. We're young enough that we haven't worked on our programs yet in terms of distributed energy resources like storage and transportation electrification. But I think that that's a piece that we could definitely use to build a strong narrative around the idea that solar has sort of matured as an industry, and that we need to look further beyond just adding solar capacity. I mean, we are parties to the proceedings of the CPUC on energy storage, on transportation electrification. And I think that's a place where we could sort of take control of our narrative and sort of drive a lot of attention towards the things that we're doing, since we're saying we don't think the future is just in piling on more solar capacity. Here are the things that we're doing to bring supplemental or complementary technologies into the community. So I think that's a place where we could have good control of our narrative. And then secondly, one thing to keep in mind, I think, if the situation that you describe comes to pass and the capacity value of solar crashes, the economics no longer pencil out, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that someone could propose a change to the RPS policy at that point. So I haven't heard anything about that, but I'm just saying that's something to keep in mind, that if we put a lot of money into bucket 1 RECs and then 5 years down the road the value of solar crashes and they change the RPS, we have potentially put a lot of money into a place that is no longer, that the policy declares is no longer a priority. So I'm not saying that
prices have plunged, right? To put it another way, we bought energy futures that are now not worth very much.
right, because we would be paying extra for the bucket 1 REC value that is no longer. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's a possibility.
And being on the engineering side, I worked for a company that sold inverters for solar, and one of the requirements that's been working down the road is that the inverters are controllable, so they can turn them down, basically. So all these people think they're getting all this solar added, and like you said, we get to this point that it's negative, and we've gotten to the point that now all of the control is there. They can start dialing back the inverters.
Who can do that? PG&E? SVCE?
No, Well, it wouldn't be SVCE. It's probably the
Russian
independent
hackers.
system operator, I would guess. Somebody that's working on grid stability, I would guess, is where it's coming from.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, the technology there's requirements for the technology to be put in place to allow the inverter to be turned down. Politically, who's controlling it or not, that's probably a different story.
Before we go too far, I would just like to get at least in my head what the recommendation that would be going to the board is going to look like. It would be, one, continue to try to get type 2 resource so we can live up to the expectations that we set for ourselves, which is 25% type 1, 25% type 2, and 50%.
That's the
large
default,
hydro
right?
for the
That's,
next.
you try to keep doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be number one.
Awesome.
Number two will, if we can't get enough PCC2, then we will up the percentage of type 1 to have 100% of the state requirement be met by PCC1. And any remaining amount that we have not been able to get either with PCC2 or with the addition of PCC1, we'll get it with PCC3, but we're going to double that amount in order to go.
What's the price?
Yeah,
That's 3 versus 2?
Two, the premium, and when you say price, we're not buying that price, we're just buying the premium over and above the conventional, so it's index plus roughly I've seen the numbers now between the PCC2 for what we bought already, what we locked in, is somewhere around $5, and the highest offer that we got in the last turnaround was somewhere around $11.50.
But how much would it be to do a 3 for the same amount? Because if 2x 3 is equal to a 2, then you could just multiply 2.
3 comes in anywhere between $1.50 to $2.
I think that the way those options are presented to the board are going to be important.
Yeah.
Right. So what is the financial risk and what is the financial cost of each?
I was going to suggest maybe a table.
Yeah, that's what I was-
Rather than trying to just do an average. I don't know if you have enough data to say, okay, for the next 3-4 years or whatever. You're talking about an average over how many years? 5 years.
Yes.
Is there a way to actually? I mean, we're not looking for perfection, but it would show us the trend, right, of how this is working out.
Well, I was looking at
And say, okay, for option 2, 3, 4, here's what it looks like.
This is the chart that Don put together, and I think it would be good just to overlay the options on top of that, because to me this is putting the political discussion aside for a minute, this becomes really a business decision that we're trying to make on what product do we buy and what's the cost of our product.
And keep in mind the risk of the PCIA, and it could go anywhere on this.
Yeah.
Well, probably not.
So that was my question: if option 1 is so expensive and it doesn't leave room for these other possibilities, then it's really not on the table. And frankly, that makes the decision easier. So that's what I was.
I mean, I
looking
think
at.
the answer to you was we do have the money to do it, but it puts us at risk if for a
Right.
lot of other things happening.
And I would want to make sure we have. I know we have a reserve policy, but even more than that. So, given all of those financial considerations, is option 1 really a viable option? Is my question. And
You mean
so,
2 or
Option 2. I
or
think.
2? The
One is sort of expressed
entire
some
PCC
not much
one.
interesting because it could change the whole market, right?
Right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I meant 2.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I know we were talking about the other programs, educational programs, and that's all great. But I mean, those are they're variable, right? They're not must-do situations, but financially, what do we need to be stable into the long term?
A number of programs that we're thinking about.
And I think conservatively, and I want to make sure we have a big cushion for that, unpredictable emergency. So, given that, I mean, I get the sense that maybe 2 isn't even viable. So, I agree with you. I really want to see the financial data to see, is that number going to, are we going to go into a deficit in year 6 or 7 if we do it? That's my
That's why
question.
some trending might be 5-year might be good.
But
And I
why
mean,
don't
my
we
other-
just do a graph that looks like this? It would be a line graph that shows
For
here's
each
the
of
power
these
supply
things,
expenses
2, 3,
for each
4,
one of the
4
outlets.
times.
This one here.
But
And
Yes.
the other thing, to Don's point, that I think is really key is
This one.
Don Bray.
Okay.
I think we need to understand what PG&E is saying about renewables and make sure our story is better.
Yeah.
You know, so we don't want to be caught with our pants down, and if it's at all possible, as we're doing this initially, to craft something where we understand what their marketing message is. I'd like to have a stronger one.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. What's presented here is already stronger. That number.
Well, it's stronger
that number
from
was
the carbon-free perspective,
yeah,
but if we could also be stronger from the RPS perspective.
right, even from a renewable standpoint, this may be stronger.
Yeah.
It's just that number came out. It was a big jump.
I'd
and,
want
yeah.
to understand as best you all do, right, or we can discern what their story is and what we imagine it being over time, and then see how these options stack up against that projected story.
their story is that they needed the RPS requirement, and every time a CCA pulls away from PG&E service territory, the amount of RPS that they have, the amount of renewables that they have, becomes a bigger percentage of the total load.
Because they dial
They're not
back
doing
everything.
anything. They just drop in load, and so your what do you call it?
Well,
Denominator
they're
becomes
dropping the
smaller.
dirty load then, right?
Yeah, so they're dialing back the gas stuff because that's the one that has the.
Well, good. That's the
That's
whole.
the one with very.
We want them there.
That's
That's our story.
We're helping them.
I know.
Until 5 years from now when they
Disrupting.
drop diagonal
And the 33%, by the way, comes in with a hell of a help from our PCIA funds that we pay in order to kind
You
of
think?
take whatever that is
Yes.
that
Yeah.
used to be their resources on their side and clean it up.
So I just have one more question before I'm done with this. But so I'd prefer to see like 2, 3, 4, and 4 prime go to the board with the data we talked about and some comparison. But I was wondering, do you see any value? I won't say any value, but is there any substantive value to us if we were going to adopt 4? Think about 4 prime instead. Is it a strong thing to come in and say, hey, we're dousing 2 credits to the extent that we're having to go to type 3 because we don't really, or is the value in
I think it depends on who you're talking about. There's probably going to be a contingent in the environmental community that, because they don't like bucket 3 to start with, will not be satisfied by us buying 2 for each one. But I
will they
think
give us any credit, or is it like no? Because that's really it, right? I mean,
Some will.
we're not doing this
I
just.
think it's a
Yeah,
mix. I
it's
think
gonna be. We can't get everybody on it.
We'll tell them we're helping them by taking it off the market.
But we're in the job
I think-
Of course.
it will. I think it will. It'll
I mean,
depend
there's
on the
benefit.
stakeholders. It'll get us credit in some quarters. I think.
It
I
certainly
mean,
shows that we know that there are funny certificates.
Yeah.
It's funny.
it does.
It helps.
Yeah.
The company,
Personally, to the
education
extent that
and
they're going beyond the 100% was going to give the
Advocacy.
cities an additional credit that they can claim against their climate change requirements. That made that one made it make sense to me. But what I'm hearing, and I don't know if that's the case, but what Melody's saying is she hasn't seen any evidence yet that could be suggested in any way or shape that we
Well,
can
what if
take.
we're not at 0 yet? Would we get credit?
What's that? If we're at 0, then the cities don't have the obligations that other cities that are being served by PG&E have, because there's a portion of the electricity is being met by natural gas or coal or whatever other dairy resources. The city's obligation, and maybe Melody, you can correct me if I'm wrong. How do you calculate?
Chair, may I offer some color? So we talked to our consultant who helps us with our climate action plan, greenhouse gas inventory, and my staff looked at the regs as well. So yes, to your point, Rod, it does help you get to 0. So bucket 3 is allowed to bring down your emissions coefficient, which in effect is all your city partners are looking for. What is your emissions coefficient? Is it 0? when we do our greenhouse gas inventory for electricity usage. It can't be negative, and cities can't further purchase offsets or use offsets to further reduce their greenhouse gas emissions inventory.
They can't.
Cannot.
So if I
According to
have
the protocol we
if
use,
I have a
which is the
composting
protocol.
facility that's putting out a lot of methane, I don't get to buy electricity recs to try to offset that in some way.
Not to offset, well, to the extent that you are a reporting producing entity, if you are reporting, for example, we generate,
You do
we have
have
power
your
generation
smart
facilities
station.
at our water pollution control plant, not the smart station,
Yeah.
but the adjacent plant.
Okay.
To the extent that we might be able to purchase offsets to reduce that as part of the portfolio, maybe, but not as a community overall.
What if we applied some of these recs? I don't know how this could be done, but to DA customer load.
To what?
To DA customer, so you got another 20% of our load that's direct access customers, and a lot of these folks are buying, inexpensive. They're buying natural gas contracts. They're buying the RPS and then gas after that. So I don't know. It's maybe you do some sort of a deal where you buy these folks recs for the first year, or you agree to split them, or it's some kind of an incentive deal, or.
Think of those Apple people.
Yeah, well, the Apple people are fine. I think it's some of the other. It's some of the others.
50%.
But it's a.
Their natural gas.
This would take some thought, but it's incremental electricity use out there that does impact the community that the community can't claim through SVCE.
But you wouldn't want to have
Carbon free right now.
We're giving big corporations.
It would have to be that they'd have to buy into it somehow.
But that's the problem with the whole strategy. There's no economic credit or environmental credit
What?
on zero. We're spending pure.
Yeah, right.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
I would,
actually,
yeah.
it is an interesting. I'm just thinking through this further. The buying 2 for 1, I guess it depends on how bold we want to be with our messaging. Like if we are viewing bucket 3 as to buy 2 for 1 does imply that we are acknowledging that these are inferior in some way. So it is an interesting. That might have some. It is interesting to think how that would play out in the messaging, because in a way, if we really were going to say we're acknowledging bucket 3 is legitimate and it meets what we're trying to do on our carbon goals. In some ways, it might send a stronger message if we just do 1. If we get rid of the 2 for 1, because there is a little bit of a sort of apologetic tone to buying 2 for 1. So I guess it depends. Those might have slightly different implications for messaging.
If you want to apologize, make it 2% less than PG instead of 1% less than PG.
So,
Spend the money that way.
I mean, whatever you, people that have dealt with energy for 30 years think is good. Incentive programs, other clever things we could do. For me, at the end of the day, global warming is a global problem, right? And it doesn't matter where you're quenching the carbon. I kind of got that religion now, and I recognize that that's not politics. So,
If we don't buy these, what happens to the wind farm in Wyoming? Is it going to stop producing?
No, it just sells at whatever the market price demands over there in Wyoming. Basically, if you buy it, or what you do, if you buy type 1, type 2, or type 3, all what you're doing is you're giving developers of either solar, wind, or whatever the type of renewables, a little bit extra money so they can put it into the next development that they're going to put it
So
in.
that's Mark,
That's what we want to do.
That's anti your message, because it's buying incentives for people to build more renewables out of the state of California with our money. If we buy extra type 3s.
And they probably voted for Trump.
Well, that doesn't matter from a mitigation standpoint.
Well, and I'm not wedded
This is
to
the science.
the credits. I just think we should. And that's actually a good point about apologizing. But is there something else that we can do on top of what we're doing without necessarily apologizing? So
No.
maybe it's not the credits,
Yes.
but it's something else.
What we want to do with this policy, to the extent we're buying type 3, is figure out how we capitalize on it with a political and or marketing message that we think furthers our interests, right? That's all.
Yeah.
And if we can't figure out a credible message to
Just
do
saying,
more
we're
than
going
one,
to do this and we
so
don't
be
care.
it, right?
It's not going to work.
If you think on net that there's a downside to it.
Well, we can give her till board meeting to
That
think
makes
about it.
sense.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
there is the message of we meet 100% of the state requirement with the highest level renewable. And then we fill in the rest with the most economically viable.
I think if the message which is right now,
Yes.
the message that we put in our strategic plan, and you folks eventually will get that, and you will get a chance to look at it, is what are your priorities? And if the priorities, as I like them, to match that I've heard at the CPUC's energy guide, and that's to be greenhouse gas free or carbon free at the lowest cost while maintaining reliability, then I think type 4 or even something less on providing PCC1 would be the way to go. Personally, I prefer type 4 because that takes the argument of, you know what, all the differentiation between 1 and 2 and 3 off of the table completely. But if the argument or the message that you or the mission that you want to establish is local control, combination of local programs and local solar or local renewable resources, improving the local economy while getting to 100% carbon free, then we have a different set of actions that we need to take. And that's perhaps after we put the strategic plan together, it comes to you for approval, you get a chance to debate it, and once that's in place, then we know what our mission is and be clear about it, and don't get sidetracked into should we go this way or that way.
Can we close this item and go on to the next one?
Yes.
Okay, so
You brought us out, Rob.
By the new chair, sure.
Sure, let's drag on. Yeah.
Okay, pull my right side, be home at 1. We're good.
Okay, item 5. Develop the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Renewable Bill Credit Transfer Tariff, RBC. Now, this is for the county's solar generating facilities, right? And you have a staff report.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you heard at the last board meeting, the County of Santa Clara is deploying 5 large-scale solar generators, 2 to 3 megawatts each, and then they are looking to use through this lightly used PG&E tariff called RESBCT, use solar dollar credits generated at those solar installations and apply those credits to facilities that they have throughout the county. So the bill credit, the dollar value of the excess generation, only the generation portion, can then be applied across facilities in the county.
Meter aggregation that some of the other CCs.
It gets called a lot of things, and there's a lot of nuances. You hear the term virtual aggregation a lot, and there are some other tariffs that are flavors of this that we do support. NEM-A being one, which is an aggregated meter kind of thing. But this is special in that we can't support this, out of the box. So we do have to develop our own version of how we would support this kind of a construct. And if we are successful in doing that, we can allow the generators that are located in SVCE services, the SVCE service area, which are 2 of the 5, and we can have that generation serve a very, very large load in the Valley Med Center, which is one of the larger loads in the county, and possibly other facilities. But it would mainly be that configuration, 2 remote sites serving this one very large load at the Valley Med Center. So a pretty simple bill credit transfer construct that we're thinking about here. We have drafted a new tariff for this. There's some details that we have to sort through with PG&E in terms of exactly how power would be scheduled, in terms of can we earn the renewable energy credit out of this, That isn't the way it's done today through PG&E. In the staff report, I have a little table that compares what's in the PG&E tariff with what's in our proposed tariff. The short story is, if mechanically we can do this, it's just a matter of making sure that things tick and tie with PG&E, that we get the meter data off of the generators in the appropriate way through PG&E, so that we can in turn it into a bill credit that we can then apply to the med center.
Any net generator, or is this very specific to just the county?
This tariff is specific to public agencies.
So, like my city has a library that's a net generator. Would it apply to them? They're a tenth of the size of their smallest. I mean, really small, but they're a net generator. Or is that not the right way?
You could do it. I mean, in theory, it would probably be not worth it unless you are producing a lot of generation there, a lot of excess credit.
Don, talk about how it differs from regular now, generation versus T&D benefits.
Yeah. So versus normal NEM, you're netting both the transmission and distribution and the generation. So at your house, for instance, when you're when you generate a kilowatt hour of excess solar, the value of that is both on the transmission and distribution side and on the generation side in terms of offsetting future use at your house. Okay. In the case of this, it's only the generation credit that's allowed to travel to the benefiting account. So it has to be generated at the right time of day, and it's all part of how this is set up, and in sufficient quantity to really make it worth going through all the trouble of putting this in place. So generally it tends to be done where there is a larger generating facility like the one that's being deployed in the county. There is a cap on this within the PG&E service area. So all of PG&E service area of 102 megawatts. We are proposing a cap which would be barely above what the two counties are producing today, with the provision that if the board at a later time decided to expand that cap, of course it could do that. But we wouldn't make this the kind of thing where we're saying, okay, everybody come and do this. The reason being that, I'll draw your attention to the financial analysis towards the bottom. This is expensive. This is a very good deal for the county in terms of the value that they're able to create and what they can offset in their bill. It's expensive to PG&E or to SVCE to serve this tariff, because what we get to charge them at, say, the hospital versus what we pay them for the excess credit, there's a big difference. And it's like six or 7 cents a kilowatt. It's actually in our service territory. Unincorporated, yeah. It's it is a San Jose address, but it's in the county.
No kidding.
So the long story short here, we are still working on the precise details and confirming that we can do all this, but and it's additional discussions with PG&E and then probably dealing with PG&E and our legal consultant on this REC ownership question. We'd like to own the REC in this. Today, as Tom mentioned, or someone mentioned, that the county would own it, but it would have value to us. They're one of the member agencies, and so for them.
So they'd sell it to us.
Well, it's not really clear what they'd be doing with it otherwise, other than taking credit for having renewable energy, which they're going to get in addition with us taking our standard service anyway. So.
Yeah, one of the things that the county is struggling with is in a couple of years from now, when PG&E does time of use, they may change this altogether, and they may end up paying for what the county will generate a whole lot less than what they are paying today.
Right.
So the county is out trying to make this a legislative mandate or regulatory mandate that would fix the income coming from PG&E, and they are obviously going to do the same thing with us for the next 10 to 20 years until they pay off the debt on this plan. That doesn't seem to be very successful.
Yeah, shift the risk from them to us and PG&E.
Yeah, basically. So what we
I'm completely against doing anything of that sort.
what we plan to do is to maybe work with them on having these units that they already bought, maybe be some of the first that we going to be obligated to buy, because sooner or later we're going to be obligated to buy something for the long term. We are required starting 2020 to have a plan that will obligate us to have eventually 60% of our loan be met by contracts that will be 10 to 20, more than 10 years in duration. So sooner or later we're going to need to make certain commitments, long-term commitments, and I quite frankly would rather have that commitment be made with one of the members instead of being made with Constellation or Shell.
As long as we get a good deal and we're not.
Of course.
I mean, every
Yeah,
time
my
I've been in a
suggestion would be
negotiation in the county, all I want to do is frankly,
Transfer as much cost to somebody else.
yeah, and risk. Okay, so, and I've been doing it recently, and so all I would tell you is, I think we ought to give them the same consideration as any other potential supplier. I believe in aggregating. I think that makes sense, right? Our school districts and our cities could potentially take advantage of that. But I given what's going on with solar, I'm pretty leery about us cutting the deal. I mean, it looks to us, from this, that actually there'd be a net benefit to us, right?
It's accretive, if you want to use that word.
It's
So
accretive,
yeah,
right.
there's and again, this is this year.
Because the option of not doing this would be they'd have to supply power to that facility.
They just have to opt out.
They
They
opt
would
out.
simply opt out, and the
for all of their load, or for
for the med center, which is
For the
a
med center.
very significant percentage of their load.
So this is accretive to us. So that's good for us, as long as we're not locking in any long-term thing that the solar pricing changes, right? Suddenly we're on the hook
We
to
will
cover them with power that's going to be more expensive.
This will follow this. What
I
we're
mean,
attempting to do
another
is
way of asking
yeah.
is it 5 years from now, if we do this deal, is it still accretive?
The rates will have to change every time we see any signs of change of PG&E's rates, because their alternative is to go and opt out and be a partner with PG&E instead. And so we're always going to have to be conscious of what PG&E will be charging them or will be paying them for the generation out of this facility, and keep changing along with that. To the extent that they come to us and say, you know what, I don't want to be in that business anymore. I got into it, maybe it was a mistake. Would you like to take these facilities off our hand?
Careful.
Then we'll look into it. We'll be careful. We'll make sure that we don't spend on it any more than what we spend anywhere else.
Yeah, like Tom's saying, we'll follow the A6 tariff, which the time of use is going to change over time. It's grandfathered for a while, but then it will change, and it'll make this a better deal. Yeah.
So this is large enough that we get generation credit for this. This is not load reduction.
Well, that's what we're looking into. That's what we're aiming to get is generation credit. We're aiming to get the RECs out of this.
It's a PCC 1 credit, right?
Yeah.
It should be, and that's the. Yeah, that's the.
I'm all down on having us retain this, or get the credit.
Yeah.
It's not a whole lot, but certainly every little bit helps. Yeah, if we're going to pay for it, might as well eat it.
And it would make down the road, if we move to the model Tom described, everything's kind of in place to do that deal, notwithstanding. So that's where we are. Keep you apprised and report to the full board.
Any other comments on this agenda item? I think we're the last one, right?
I'm hopeful that nobody will object to it.
In terms of future agenda items, I'm wondering, should we have a standing legislative bill review at this meeting, given the surprise requests we're seeing?
Well, starting in this coming board meeting, you will have in my report attached to it legislative and regulatory update, similar to the marketing update that you have been seeing for the last few months. And I've just talked to Hillary. We're going to put together a workshop similar to the workshop that we put together a few months back to talk about operation of the system. This time, this workshop is going to be to talk about legislative and regulatory issues, and eventually we'll have a legislative platform that we can share with you guys, and we'll say this is all the bills that have been introduced, and this is the position that we take on each and every one. Will make it a little easier for us when we are asked, and we were asked on Friday, by the way, to give our position on 3 legislation that are being discussed now, and we were asked to give our position by Monday. So we had the weekend, right, to think about, and my answer to them was, I don't have that kind of authority from the board to be able to come back to you that quickly. So my answer is, it's oppose on all of them until they change in a way that would be beneficial to us. It's always easier to say no than to try to say fix it this way or that way. So what we were going to try to do is to get a legislative platform, get that done, have the board bless it, and then we can use that as our guide in case we have to come up with a very quick turnaround for a decision for one of those guys.
Okay, Ron?
On this topic, I put in a request to you a couple of months ago, maybe more. I thought we needed to have CalCCA form a committee of board members that are willing to do legislative advocacy, because with all the technical experts you have, people that are used to presenting professionally, we also have political connections, that's right.
Yes.
And I think I would like to see us, because Jeff Cyphers will drive the agenda and give us no time and just tell us what he thinks we should do. And I don't know whether to trust this guy or not. But what I would do with this is I would say, okay, number one, Hillary can lead this workshop, right? And tell us what's what. And I would love to see a strategy. What is our legislative strategy? Not what do we think about this bill? What do we think about that bill? But start with the strategy. What are we trying to accomplish? Because some of it goes to Sacramento, some of it goes to San Francisco, right? And then, okay, here are some tactics we're going to use, and that's how the strategy and tactics apply to our thinking about this bill, that bill, whatever's currently in the pipeline. But then the second thing I think we can do as a member of CalCCA, and frankly, you haven't been as engaged as some of these other people are, because it's not your focus. You love doing the operational stuff, and you leave all that talking and crap to the others. But I think some of us on the board, right, would have a keen interest in getting together with the Pines of the world and the folks up in Sonoma and Marin that are on the board that care and are willing to go. Because, it means spending time in San Francisco and Sacramento. And I think we ought to be having a discussion at the board between subsets of each board about what we ought to be doing. And share conversations we've had with key legislators, the Jerry Hills of the world, right? And the Mullins who could help us or hurt us if we're and keep those relationships going so that when it's time, we've already built that contact and we can help you. But I'm really concerned about the way this has been thrust on us, where Jeff figures it all out and just tells us, okay, now we got to generate letters. I think we haven't done enough to socialize what a strategy is. I don't even know if there's a strategy. But anyway, so that's where I'm at with this.
Can I just give me a second? I need to address at least 3 topics.
Yeah.
One is CalCCA. I've been, at least for the last 2 board meetings, asked them to consider the idea of having a regulatory legislative group that's made up of elected officials.
Okay.
Because I think, and I truly believe that no matter how much better informed or know better, you guys are going to be the most effective people that can actually move things in Sacramento. So
It's going to take both,
That-
honestly.
that-
Okay.
of course, we'll always be there to support you guys and give you the analysis that you need. But bottom line is, you guys are the most effective people that can do it. I have not got enough people now from the CalCCA board to come my way. Here's the next thing that I think is going to make it work.
We could change that too with a conversation with some of the
Yes.
board members.
Stay with me, I'm getting there.
Okay.
That what I've asked for, and I think I've got that one, is to have the CalCCA hire somebody that would be a chief executive or a chief operating officer that would be the one that would be that will run the show, basically. Right now, CCA is relying on its CEOs and all the regulatory people that they're working for all the different agencies to move things along. That is obviously not an easy thing to do when every CEO believes that they're really in charge of this or that or the other thing. And Jeff, as you probably put it a couple of times now, like the idea of to be in charge of the legislative side of the business, and he doesn't want to let go of that one. Fair enough. But once we get the CEO or the CEO in place, then the first request that I would be making of that person is go get yourself a legislative committee made up of the elected officials from the member agencies. So each member agency will appoint one person from the people that sit on its board to become a legislative committee for CalCCA. So that is taken care of. Strategies, as you put it, we need to see strategies and not just a bunch of positions that we can take on legislative issues. The strategies, along with the tactics and the goals related to legislative and regulatory issues, all of it is going to be in the strategic plan, which will be shared with you guys, hopefully as early as April, as late as May. I hope I addressed all your questions. Hillary, go ahead.
I was just going to say
Yeah,
that
let me have it.
I know.
I deserved it after
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
I would say that you are not the only person who has expressed dissatisfaction with the current situation, which has been this sort of ad hoc
Could
collaboration.
even be you, right?
And
Somebody
you're
who
exactly
actually
right.
knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's right now it's been kind of this ad hoc collaboration that's based a little bit on seniority, because not sort of explicitly, but just because generally the ones who have been around longer have more institutional capacity, and so that's why Marin also does a lot on the regulatory side. I mean, their regulatory team is like the size of our whole company. But that said, there has been, I know, some dissatisfaction with how things are going in this sense, and there's an effort right now to put together an official protocol for CalCCA for how we develop legislative positions. So that is, I just wanted to put that out there, that is
Great.
in the works, and others have noted that we need a more formal protocol that ensures that everybody is being heard.
And you need the speedy protocol. I'm not denying it, but there ought to be a basis, right, on which when some hot bill comes up and you need support and you want us all writing that we've already built the connections, we've already got the strategy, and we understand how this little piece of a bill sits in the framework of the strategy and the tactics that we've had prior conversations about. So, okay, if the call is 2 p.m. tomorrow, we all get on and we have context, right? That's the point.
I think it's a good idea, and CalCCA is still, basically I think their institutional capacity is still very much growing. So it's something that we should be aiming for in the future, and there's interest in that.
I appreciate it, so thank you.
Does anybody else have comments on this or other subjects they'd like to make? Okay, well that's the end of our agenda then.
So Monday, 12 o'clock. 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 So Monday.